Garrett G25 V-band with an internal wastegate. This is the first time we've seen or used one of the new G series turbos with an internal wastegate. We've had lots of kind of V-band setups for majority of our kits, all use V-band setups with Garrett. G25s, G30s, in the different compressor sizes. But this is the first time I've seen an internal gate one. The older Garrett internal gates were always a little bit cheap, I guess. I'm not sure it's because they haven't had much development over time. They haven't they're quite an old type turbo and haven't really moved much. But this, just on first glance, is a definite kind of step up in terms of quality. Just aesthetically, they look so much nicer than the old ones did. And I think that almost without even really getting into the technical stuff, you know they're going to perform better than the old internal wastegate ones did. So just to cover the outside compressor type stuff, again, we've done videos on these before, but these are a much nicer kind of compressor cover than the old GT and GTX turbos. Really nice smooth casting. They've got the Garrett logo in now. A takeoff, pre-drilled and tapped for your boost control solenoid, pre-drilled and tapped for a speed sensor. It's got the anti-surge. So it's basically got everything you really kind of want that they didn't used to have, to be honest. That was kind of where the EFRs were a bit better, in that they had these features and they looked a little bit nicer, and the Garrett looked kind of old. So, they've been doing that for a couple of years now. But where this one's different is actually on the turbine housing. Like I said, this one's an internal wastegate version. So as soon as I got this out of the box, just the actual external casting of this housing is so much nicer than the old ones used to be. I would even go as far as to say it's nicer than the EFR ones, although I would say the EFR ones are a little older than these now. I think the EFR internal wastegates have been available for 5 or 6 years, probably more. So about since 2016, it's 2021 now. Obviously, with it being internal wastegate, the turbine housing is quite a lot wider because you need to be able to fit the area for that flat valve in. So that's always something to consider when you want to run an internal wastegate setup. The turbo will be quite a lot longer in terms of width, whereas normally an external wastegate turbo, your kind of turbine housing would finish here, but you can kind of then put the wastegate wherever you want it. The advantage of an internal wastegate turbo is it's all built in, so it's almost inherently more reliable, but they do have the limitations because you are limited by the actual flat valve. You can only bypass so much gas through there. So if you think you're going to be needing an awful lot of wastegate, it's generally not best to go for a internal wastegate type turbo. So essentially, if you're going to be running not a lot of boost pressure and you're going to want to bleed a lot off, you might not, an internal gate turbo might not really suit. If you're looking at like a twin turbo type setup on a 6-cylinder engine, you might only be wanting to run the turbos at quite a low boost pressure. So that's where you might find the limitations of an internal wastegate turbo. Not always. It's so situational and there's so many variables. It really is one of those where it more or less is so specific to the setup and what your kind of intentions are that these things need to be worked out ahead of time, really, and kind of calculated ahead of time. But one of the other things that's really nice about these, again, is like we've got the Garrett logo in the turbine housing, which actually is a really crisp cast logo. You don't ever see casting that's that kind of crisp, really, especially on a mass-produced product like this. I mean, they'll be banging out thousands of these, and that is, it's really nice, kind of really crisp, sharp edges on the logo. Again, all the machining work is so much nicer on these more modern G series turbos now. Like all of these edges are like finished. They're not sharp. Obviously, it's had probably some tumbling done after the machining, but still, it's really nice. The bracket for the flap valve is about 4mm thick, which is pretty stout. I don't think you're ever going to have any problems with the kind of reliability of that. Again, like, you know, really solid welds on top of that flap valve. The wastegate valve is pretty big. I'm not going to measure it, but I'm going to guess it is roughly the same size as what they tend to use on the EFRs as well. So I think it looks to be about 1.75 inches in terms of valve diameter. So that is pretty much going to give you about the same wastegate size as like a TurboSmart 40mm wastegate. So if that's what you're kind of intending on running, or if that's what your current setup uses, you know, again, using an internal wastegate, you're probably not going to have any problems, because the flow of an internal wastegate is almost always going to be superior to a kind of external wastegate setup. Some collectors are really kind of biased to the wastegate, and that's good. You want to promote as much flow as possible to the wastegate so that when you need it, the gas will naturally want to go down and through the open wastegate. But with an internal, because it's so close to the turbine housing, it really is the best place for it. The actual actuator bracket is also really nice on this. It's casted, so there's no kind of deviations in what you can get sometimes in laser cut and folded parts. There can always be like minor inaccuracies, but this has been casted and then machined. So all of the faces where the bolts are and where the actuator bolts up are all machined. Again, it's really nice. Honestly, for the kind of price these are obviously more expensive than an external gate turbo, but the wastegate's built in, so you don't need to buy one additionally. They are really nice. I'm definitely impressed. One of the only disadvantages I can see, and it might not be a disadvantage for everyone, is because of the cranked type actuator rod. If you want to kind of change the actuator for a tunable type actuator, like a TurboSmart one where you can change the valve spring, you're not going to be able to do that as easily, because as far as I'm aware at the minute, TurboSmart don't have a replacement off-the-shelf actuator that fit these turbos. That might change. I'd imagine it probably will, because, you know, these are, or will be in a few years' time, a very common turbo. So TurboSmart will obviously want to cater for that. But yeah, it's just something to bear in mind at the minute, that, you know, the only way to kind of tune the wastegate is going to be externally via boost control. You're not going to be able to change the poundage in there. I'd say there's a good chance that Garrett probably do offer 2 or 3 variants of spring pressure in here, just like BorgWarner do, but it just means buying additional things. And I think one of the advantages of bolting on a TurboSmart actuator is you can just change the springs. They come with a full set of springs from like 5 psi to like 24 psi, and it's so easy to then change the springs. It's what we do on all our internal wastegate EFR setups. But other than that, it pretty much is exactly the same as the external gate turbos. So we'll put a link to that in the description, because I go through the kind of core and things like that in a bit more detail, and the compressor design and things like that. But yeah, looking forward to using these on another project that you're going to see soon.